My boss demanded I work overtime for free so his son could take my salary. When I refused, he smirked. Then you're fired. The next day, I walked into the boardroom with a flash drive. Before I leave, let's discuss what I found in the company's finances. I worked for a mid-sized logistics company in Chicago for over 10 years. I wasn't some executive, but I handled cost projections, payroll, and financial audits. I knew the company's numbers inside and out. The company was owned by Richard Harding, an arrogant, self-important man who thought he was the smartest person in the room. He had the classic "I built this company" mentality, even though most of the real work was done by people like me. Still, I kept my head down. Did my job. Stayed out of office politics. I liked my work, and it paid well enough. Then his useless son, Bradley, graduated from college. Bradley had a business degree from some overpriced school. He never worked a real job in his life. He barely showed up when he was interning over the summer, but that didn't stop his daddy from giving him a job. At first, nobody knew what Bradley was supposed to be doing. He'd wander around the office, playing on his phone, chatting with people, taking 2-hour lunches. Then, one Friday afternoon, I got a meeting request from Mr. Harding. That was unusual. I reported to the CFO, not him. But I didn't question it. When I walked into his office, he had that fake, slimy grin. The one he used when he was about to screw someone over and pretend it was a favor. "You've been doing great work, but we need to make some changes," he said. "Bradley is going to be learning the finance department. I need you to train him on everything you do." Okay. Annoying, but not a deal breaker. I could teach a few things, whatever. Then he dropped the bomb. "We're reallocating your salary to cover his training period," he continued. "Just for a few months." I blinked. "Excuse me? We need to tighten the budget," he said. "You'll still have your job, you just won't be getting paid for a bit. Just pick up a few extra hours in the evenings to show Bradley the ropes. Once he's up to speed, we'll bring you back on full salary." I stared at him. "You want me to work for free? While your son, who has never done this job, gets paid?" He smirked. "It's just temporary," he repeated. "I know you're a team player." There was no way in hell I was agreeing to that. "No," I said. The smirk vanished. He wasn't used to people telling him no. "Excuse me? No. I'm not working for free. And I'm definitely not training some rich kid to take my job." His eyes narrowed. His fake charm dropped completely. "Then I'm afraid we'll have to let you go." Just like that. No warning. No severance. Fired for not agreeing to be a corporate slave. I kept my face neutral. I didn't argue. Didn't fight it. I just stood up, nodded, and walked out. On my way back to my desk, I passed by Bradley, who was already kicked back in my chair, feet up on my desk, scrolling on his phone. "Hey man," he said. "No hard feelings, right?" I didn't respond. Just walked to my desk, grabbed my bag, and left. But what Harding forgot, what Bradley didn't know, was that I had access to every single financial record in that company. And I had receipts. Over the years, I had noticed things. Consulting fees, paid to companies that didn't seem to exist. Strange wire transfers that didn't match any invoices. Expense reports that made no sense. At first, I assumed it was just sloppy accounting. But the more I looked, the more obvious it became. Harding was stealing from his own company. And I had years' worth of proof saved. Lucky for me, I had the habit of backing up key financial data to a personal flash drive, just in case. I spent the weekend organizing everything, making sure it was airtight. Then, on Monday morning, I walked back into the office. The receptionist looked panicked when she saw me. You don't work here anymore." "It's fine," I said, smiling. "Just here for a quick meeting." I walked straight past her and into the weekly board meeting. The board members were already seated. Harding was at the head of the table, looking smug, probably bragging about his son's new role. When he saw me, his face turned red. "What the hell are you doing here?" he snapped. I didn't answer. I just walked to the projector, plugged in my flash drive, and brought up the first slide. The screen filled with numbers, transactions, and emails. Fake invoices. Misreported earnings. Hundreds of thousands of dollars missing. I turned to face the board. "Before I leave, let's talk about some irregularities in the company's finances." At first, nobody spoke. Then, one of the older board members, someone who had been around since the company was founded, cleared his throat. "Richard," he said slowly. "Is this true?" Harding stammered. This is nonsense. He's a disgruntled ex-employee." I clicked to the next slide. An email from Harding himself. It approved a fraudulent transaction. A transaction that moved company money into a personal account. Silence. Then chaos. The boardroom erupted. Some board members were whispering to each other, others were furiously flipping through documents, trying to understand what they were looking at. One of them, a guy named Mark Hastings, the longest-serving board member, slammed his fist on the table. "Richard," he said, voice low and deadly. "Explain this. Now." Harding was sweating. His face was bright red. "This is all misinterpreted," he said quickly. "These numbers are being taken out of context. You're going to believe a disgruntled ex-employee over me?" I didn't say a word. Just click to the next slide. A direct wire transfer of $200,000 to a personal account in Harding's name. The room went silent again. Then Mark turned to me. "Where did you get this?" "I handled the company's financial records for over 10 years. I said, keeping my voice calm. "I didn't go looking for this, it was just there. Sitting in the reports. But nobody else ever checked." Another board member, Janice Whitmore, looked at Harding like he was something stuck to her shoe. "Is this why you fired him?" she asked. "Because he knew?" Harding looked like a cornered animal. His eyes darted around the table, searching for a way out. He still had that fake confidence, but it was cracking. "This is ridiculous," he huffed. "I've been running this company for 30 years. And you're going to take the word of some pencil pusher over me?" Mark folded his arms. "The numbers don't lie, Richard." That's when Harding lost it. "You're all a bunch of idiots," he shouted, slamming his hands on the table. "This company wouldn't exist without me. I built this. And you stole from it," I added. His head snapped toward me. He hissed. "You think you're so clever? You think you can just waltz in here and—" Mark cut him off. "I think we've heard enough." Then he turned to me. "I assume you've sent copies of this to legal and accounting?" I smiled. "Already did. This is just the highlights. There's more." The moment those words left my mouth, Harding lunged across the table. I had never seen a man his age move so fast. His chair toppled over, and for a second, I thought he was actually going to attack me. But before he could reach me, Mark and another board member grabbed him and shoved him back into his seat. "Get yourself together, Richard," Mark snapped. Harding was breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. He was shaking, from rage or fear, I couldn't tell. Then the door flew open. Standing in the doorway was Bradley. He looked confused. Annoyed. "Dad?" he said. "What's going on?" Harding's head snapped around to look at his son, and for the first time, I saw it. Real fear. "Not now, Bradley," he said through gritted teeth. Bradley ignored him. He strolled in, still acting like he owned the place. "What the hell is this meeting about?" He turned to me. "Why are you still here?" I turned to the board. "Should I tell him?" I asked. Mark gestured for me to continue. I clicked to the next slide. And there it was. A transaction for $50,000, wired directly to Bradley's bank account. Bradley froze. What's that?" he asked, fake laughing. "That's probably a mistake." I clicked again. 3 more transfers. Totaling over $200,000. Bradley's face drained of color. "Dad?" he said, voice small now. Harding's hands curled into fists on the table. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might break. "You idiot!" Harding spat. Bradley stepped back. I didn't do anything," he stammered. "You told me." He stopped. Too late. Everyone heard it. "Oh, please," I said, enjoying this more than I should. "Tell us. What did he tell you?" Harding stood up so fast his chair crashed to the ground. "This is a witch hunt," he roared. "I built this company. You can't do this to me." "Richard," Mark said, standing up. "I think you should sit down." "Screw you, Mark," Harding bellowed. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Just waiting to stab me in the back." Mark didn't react. "This isn't personal," he said. "It's business." Harding's breath hitched. Because he knew. He knew what was happening. Then, before anyone could say another word, Harding turned to his son. "I told you not to spend it." Bradley flinched. "Dad, I thought it was fine. You said it was just—" "Shut the hell up, Bradley," Harding shouted. Everyone was watching. Nobody stopped him. Because it was over. He had buried himself. I just sat back, watching the show. Then the door opened again. And 2 men in suits walked in. "Mr. Harding?" one of them said, holding up a badge. It was the SEC. And that's when I saw it. For the first time ever, Richard Harding looked afraid. The SEC agent stood in the doorway, scanning the room. Everyone froze. Harding was still standing, fists clenched, face red. Bradley looked like a cornered rat, eyes darting between his father and the agents. The board members stayed silent, watching things spiral out of control. One of the agents, a tall guy with graying hair, pulled out a folder and flipped through a few pages. "Mr. Harding," he said, calm and professional, "we have some questions regarding your company's financial records." Harding swallowed hard. "I don't know what this is about," he said, forcing a fake laugh. "This is a private board meeting. You can't just barge in here." The agent lifted an eyebrow. "We can. And we will." He turned to me. "Are you the one who provided the documents?" I nodded. "Yes, sir." Bradley let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on," he scoffed. "You're listening to him? He's just some bitter ex-employee. This is a waste of time." The agent didn't even look at him. He just pulled out another document and slid it across the table. It was a subpoena. "We've been investigating your father for some time now," the agent continued. "Your financial reports raised some red flags. This new evidence speeds things up." Harding paled. "This is ridiculous," he growled. "You have nothing on me." The agent shrugged. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe not. But when the IRS and the SEC both take an interest in your books, it usually doesn't end well." "The IRS?" Harding's expression shifted. That was real fear now. "You don't have a case," he muttered. The agent tapped a page in the folder. "Then you won't mind coming with us for questioning." Before Harding could respond, Mark Hastings, the same board member who had been grilling him minutes ago, cleared his throat. "Gentlemen," Mark said, voice smooth, "before you go, I'd like to clarify something." The SEC agents turned to him. "The board was not aware of any financial misconduct," Mark continued. "If Mr. Harding has been engaging in illegal activity, he did so without our knowledge or consent." Harding's head snapped toward Mark. "What the hell are you doing?" Harding hissed. "Distancing ourselves," Mark said simply. "Mark, Richard," Mark interrupted, his voice like steel. "You've been running this company like a personal ATM for years. We all suspected it. But now we have proof. You are on your own." Harding looked like he had been punched in the gut. "You spineless piece of—" Mark lifted a hand. He cut in smoothly. "Let's not make this harder on yourself." The board members nodded. That's when it hit me. They had been waiting for this. Harding had pissed off a lot of people over the years. The board tolerated him because he made them money. But now that he was a liability, they were dropping him like dead weight. And they weren't just letting the SEC take him. They were throwing him under the bus. Bradley must have realized what was happening, because he snapped. "This isn't fair," he yelled, pointing at me. "This is his fault. He's the one who stole the files. Isn't that illegal?" The agent turned to me. "Did you steal company property?" I smiled. "Nope," I said. "I had access to all financial records as part of my job. And technically, these weren't even restricted files. If anyone actually bothered to check, they would have seen them." The agent smirked. "Then you're fine." Bradley's mouth opened and closed, like he wanted to argue, but his brain couldn't keep up. Then he turned to his father. "Dad?" Harding didn't even look at him. Bradley's face twisted. "You're seriously just going to let them take you?" Silence. "Dad? Do something." Harding still didn't respond. Then Bradley made the dumbest mistake of his life. He lunged at my flash drive. I saw it happen in slow motion. Bradley lunging forward, his hands reaching for my laptop, his face twisted in panic and rage. But before he could touch it, a board member, a quiet but heavy-set guy named Wallace, suddenly stuck out his arm and clotheslined him. Bradley hit the floor like a sack of bricks. The whole room stared. Wallace, who had barely spoken this entire time, looked down at Bradley like he was an insect. "You," he said, voice calm, "are an embarrassment." Bradley groaned on the floor. "You broke my nose," he whined. Nobody cared. Then pure chaos. While everyone was distracted, Harding moved. 1 second, he was standing there, pale and sweating. The next, he turned and bolted for the door. The SEC agents reacted instantly. "Hey!" one of them barked. But Harding was faster than anyone expected. He shoved past the agents, ripped open the boardroom door, and took off down the hallway. Bradley, still sitting on the floor, looked after him in shock. "Dad?" Harding didn't even look back. Then, just as quickly, SEC agents took off after him. Everyone just stood there. Harding, the owner of this company, was literally running for his life down the halls of his own building. I heard a crash somewhere in the distance. Someone shouted. Mark sat back in his chair, adjusting his tie like nothing happened. Well, he said, sighing. That was dramatic. Then he turned to Bradley. And what should we do with you? Bradley froze. Wah, what do you mean? He stammered. I wasn't. Mark glanced at me. Is his name on any of the fraudulent reports? I grinned. Oh yeah, I said. Plenty. Bradley went ghost white. And oh wait. Mark turned to security. Get him out of my sight. 2 security guards grabbed Bradley and hauled him out. He screamed the whole way. Then Mark looked at me. You, he said. We need to talk. Harding was gone, bolting through the office hallways with SEC agents chasing after him. Bradley had just been dragged out, still screaming about how this wasn't his fault. And I was sitting in the boardroom, across from Mark Hastings, who was watching me with the expression of a man who saw opportunity in chaos. You, Mark repeated. We need to talk. The remaining board members, still shaken, turned their attention to me. I leaned back in my chair. I don't work here anymore, remember? I said. Mark smirked. Maybe that's something we can fix. The room quieted. What are you proposing? I asked. Mark folded his hands. Harding is done, he said. Even if he doesn't get arrested today, he's out. The board will vote to remove him by the end of the day. Good for you, I said. We need someone who actually understands the company's financials to help clean up the mess. Mark continued. And you, apparently, are the only one who saw this coming before it blew up in our faces. I tilted my head. You want to hire me back? Mark's smile didn't reach his eyes. You never stopped being useful, he said. We just didn't realize it at the time. I let that sit for a moment. The board wanted to save themselves. They weren't offering me my job back because they respected me. They needed a scapegoat who could also clean up Harding's mess. No thanks, I said, standing up. Mark blinked. Excuse me? You sat here for years and let Harding do whatever he wanted, I said. You knew something was off. You just didn't care, until it became a threat to you. Silence. So no, Mark, I continued. I don't think I want to fix your problems. Mark's expression darkened. Be careful, son, he said, voice quiet. You don't want to make enemies today. I laughed. What are you going to do? I asked. Fire me again? That got a chuckle from Janice Whitmore, the board member who had questioned Harding earlier. Mark's jaw tightened, but before he could say anything else, the boardroom doors slammed open again. A security guard stepped inside, out of breath. We got him. We followed the security guard into the lobby. Harding was pinned against a desk, one arm twisted behind his back by an SEC agent, his expensive suit disheveled and his face contorted in rage. Get your hands off me, he roared, trying to shake them off. Bradley was standing nearby, looking completely lost, his face still red from being thrown out earlier. Dad? He said weakly. Harding snapped his head toward his son. You! He shouted. You ruined everything! Bradley flinched. Me? He stammered. I didn't, I just did what you told me. Harding laughed bitterly. You're too stupid to even do that right. He spat. Bradley looked like he had been slapped. Everyone was watching. Employees had gathered in the lobby, whispering, phones out, recording the downfall of their boss in real time. Harding looked around, realizing just how many people were witnessing his humiliation. His breathing was ragged. His face was red, but his eyes? His eyes were empty. Then his gaze landed on me. You, he growled. I met his stare without flinching. This is your fault. He seethed. I smirked. No, I said. This is your fault. That broke something in him. Harding lunged. 1 second, he was pinned. The next? He was ripping free from the agent's grasp, charging straight at me. He actually got within a foot of me, and then wham. Security slammed him to the floor. Harding let out a pained grunt, his cheek hitting the cold marble. Stay down, one of the agents snapped. Harding didn't fight this time. Maybe he knew it was over. Maybe he was just too tired to resist anymore. By the end of the day, Harding was arrested. The SEC and IRS had more than enough evidence to open a full investigation. Bradley was fired. Turns out, throwing a tantrum and trying to physically grab evidence in a board meeting wasn't a great look. The company's stock tanked. News of the fraud spread fast, and investors panicked. And me? I got job offers. Mark tried one last time to convince me to come back. Said they'd make me CFO if I helped restore order. I laughed in his face. Instead, I took a better offer from a competitor, with a fat signing bonus. And the best part? That competitor was one of the companies Harding had screwed over years ago. They were more than happy to watch him burn. A few months later, I saw a news article about Harding. Turns out, the IRS dug deeper than expected. They didn't just find fraud in his company. They found personal tax evasion, offshore accounts, and fraudulent investments. He was looking at decades in prison. Bradley? Vanished from the business world. Last I heard, he was trying to start a podcast about how hard work gets you ahead. And me? I got everything I wanted. I walked away with my dignity, my career intact, and a better job. Harding? He lost everything. So if there's one lesson here, it's this. If you're going to screw someone over, make sure they don't have a flash drive full of your crimes.